Snow fell in slow feathers that morning, the kind that quieted the world until even sorrow sounded distant. Clara Whitmore walked through it with borrowed boots and borrowed courage. 25 years old and already tired of surviving. Her breath rose in pale ghosts, and every step pressed pain into her bones. Yet she kept moving because stopping felt too much like giving permission to disappear. She carried no bag, only a memory of doors closing behind her and the echo of a whisper that followed her through the drifts. Trouble. She had learned the word early, after a promise turned brittle, and a man left her holding blame that was never hers. The town wrote its verdict in sideways glances, and when the sheriff asked questions, he already knew the answers he wanted. Clara fled before the cold season closed the roads, trading scandal for silence. But silence could be cruel, too. It reminded her of nights spent awake, counting mistakes that were not mistakes, and it taught her to speak softly even when her heart begged to scream. By the time she reached the narrow valley, her knees shook and the world tilted with white light. She stumbled against a pine and slid down its trunk, resting her forehead on cold bark. She whispered no one, "I am nothing but trouble," because the trees could not argue. When she tried to rise, her legs refused, and she waited for the snow to finish what the town had begun. He came without hurry, a tall shape moving to the pale curtain, boots steady, shoulders broad beneath a fur coat. Elias Croridge had been checking his traps, counting pelts and thoughts, when he saw the dark knot of her hair against a drift. He knelt beside her and set his hand near her cheek, careful not to startle the last strength from her eyes. "Easy," he said, voice low as wind over stone. She looked up and found a face cut by weather yet warmed by patience. He lifted her with practiced care, not as a burden but as something that mattered, and carried her to the small cabin crouched near the creek. Inside, fire breathed orange light onto the walls. He gave her dry wool and poured broth into a chipped cup. Clara drank slowly, afraid that if she moved too quickly the warmth would break like glass. She watched him move, the scar across his knuckles, the careful way he set tools in their place, and she felt strange safety settle in her chest. When she tried to thank him, the words tangled. Instead, she said, "I bring trouble." Elias smiled a small curve of kindness and answered, "Trouble's the only thing worth keeping." He did not touch her again, only placed the blanket closer, and that restraint taught her more than any promise. The next day, he took her to town for supplies. Snow melted into mud at the street, and Clara felt every eye find her. Martha Bell leaned from the inn door and whispered to the butcher, and the butcher told the barber, and the barber carried it to the church steps. By noon, the story had grown claws. A lost girl living with a mountain man, and everyone knew what that meant. Elias kept his gaze forward, bought flour, salt, and candles, and never let go of the space beside her. That night, Clara lay awake on the narrow bed, listening to wind talk to the eaves. She thought of how easily kindness could turn into rumor, and how quickly rumor could become a knife. She rose before dawn, folded the borrowed wool, and set it by the hearth. With shaking hands, she gathered the little courage she had found and opened the door. Snow waited, wide and quiet, ready to take her back. She stepped onto the threshold, breath held, and listened for the cabin to speak, for the fire to call her back. But only the creek answered, soft and patient. She told herself this leaving was mercy, a gift to the man who had carried her from the snow. Yet her feet would not move, and in that pause she felt the fragile beginning of something she did not yet have a name for. Behind her the floor creaked, and she knew without turning that Elias was awake. She did not look back, afraid that one glance might undo her decision, but she waited, heart loud as the falling snow, balanced between running and staying, between the girl the world had discarded and the woman she might become. The door remained open, cold threading inside, and still neither of them spoke. Clara felt the weight of choice settle into her bones, heavy and bright, and she wondered if this silence was the last shelter she would ever know. Outside, the sky began to pale, promising another long day, and she stood there trembling, unsure whether to step forward into loneliness or turn back toward uncertain hope, unaware that this moment would carve the shape of everything to come. The snow kept falling, soft as breath, and time slowed around her, waiting for the choice that would pull the future into motion, even as her heart whispered that endings sometimes hide inside beginnings. She inhaled, trembling, and finally moved. Forward. Elias spoke before Clara turned around, his voice calm yet firm. He told her that leaving would not erase rumors, nor would staying create new sins. Clara faced him, tears freezing on lashes, and confessed every buried memory. The broken promise, the false blame, the hunger nights, the constant running. He listened without interrupting, hands resting on table, breathing slow, giving space for truth. When she finished, silence stretched, heavy but gentle. Elias answered with his own story, describing wealth earned from trapping and trading, yet nights empty, meals quiet, and laughter absent. He admitted fear of building closeness because loss had carved scars. He said he would rather risk pain than keep cold safety again. Outside, the cabin wind softened, and dawn colored snow pink. Clara felt something steady awaken inside her chest. Not hope yet, but readiness. They walked the town together, steps matched, shoulders close. Martha Bell stared, and others gathered near the store, whispering with practiced cruelty. Sheriff Coleharp approached, boots loud, hand near belt, eyes searching. He asked questions shaped like accusations. Elias answered carefully, protecting Clara without lying, describing how he found her and offered shelter. Clara then spoke, voice shaking yet clear, refusing silence, naming truth, demanding dignity. The crowd shifted, uncertain, and used the bravery from broken people. Old Silas Boone stepped forward, thin and weathered, confirming Elias's words. He reminded them how storms test character more than comfort. The sheriff hesitated, then lowered his hand, offering quiet apology without ceremony. The crowd slowly dispersed, disappointment heavier than anger. Clara breathed deeply, realizing survival had changed into standing. Elias placed his coat around her shoulders, not possessive, simply present. Snow fell again, gentle and slow, blessing the ground. They returned to the cabin, walking lighter, sharing silence filled with meaning. That evening Clara cooked soup, Elias mended tools, and both learned peace. Days passed, stitched together with small kindnesses. Clara cleaned, learned trapping basics, and planted seeds beside the cabin. Elias showed her trails and safe crossings, teaching patience. Their affection grew through gestures, shared glances, and quiet laughter. One night by firelight, Clara reached for his hand, fingers trembling, and he accepted without rushing. They did not speak of love, yet warmth filled the room. Outside, wolves howled far away, reminding them of wild dangers, yet inside felt protected. Clara slept peacefully, dreaming not of escape, but belonging. Spring approached, softening ice and hearts. Elias invited Clara to stay, not as rescue, but as choice. He said she belonged wherever she decided to stand. Clara answered by unpacking her few things and placing them beside his, creating shared space. They stood outside watching sunrise, hands entwined, feeling new beginnings breathe. She thanked him for seeing worth inside her silence. He thanked her for bringing color into lonely days. The valley echoed with birds, promising growth and change. That night, Clara wrote a letter she never planned to send, describing survival and renewal, then burned it, releasing past burdens. She stepped onto porch beside Elias, stars bright above them. He asked softly whether she feared tomorrow. She answered honestly that fear remained, yet courage now walked beside it. They stood together, quiet and strong, watching fireflies dance, knowing challenges would come. Still they believed they could face storms together. In that shared stillness, the future opened, wide and uncertain, yet beautiful. Summer arrived with heat and labor. Clara learned trading, riding, and negotiating pelts, gaining confidence. Elias watched her grow stronger, admiring resilience. Some townsfolk returned with cautious respect, offering small kindnesses. Clara accepted carefully, protecting heart while opening doors. One evening she visited town alone, proving independence, and returned smiling, carrying bread and news. Elias felt pride and quiet jealousy, realizing attachment had deepened. They discussed boundaries, hopes, and shared dreams, shaping partnerships slowly. Autumn shadows lengthened, bringing rumors of harsh winter. Claire and Elias prepared supplies, stacking wood and storing food. During this work, they shared stories of childhood, laughter mixing with wind. Clara realized she no longer felt broken, only human. Elias realized he no longer felt alone. On the final warm evening, they stood by the creek, promising nothing aloud, yet committing through presence. The stars reflected on water, and Clara sensed another chapter beginning, filled with trials and tenderness, inviting the reader onward. Night settled gently over the valley. Clara returned to the cabin, lit the lamp, and opened the door wide, letting cold air mix with warmth. Elias followed, carrying wood, smiling softly. They sat together, planning tomorrow's tasks, speaking about gardens repairs and travel. Clara imagined future journeys beyond mountains, no longer running, only exploring. Elias imagined building rooms, laughter echoing inside. Their shared visions did not promise perfection, yet promised effort. As fire crackled, Clara leaned against him, closing her eyes, ready to step forward again. Outside, snow clouds gathered again, hinting future hardship. Clara watched sky and smiled softly, unafraid. She whispered thanks to silent mountains for second chances. Elias squeezed her hand, sensing her calm strength. Together they stood at doorway, facing dark horizon, not with dread but courage. The road ahead waited unseen, yet inviting. With one step forward together, they crossed invisible threshold, leaving old pain behind, entering shared story, carrying hope like quiet fire within hearts. Tomorrow awaited them with storms, sunlight, and unspoken adventures, calling readers onward into deeper chapters beyond this beginning of continuing shared lives together.